Oh lord. Alright, today we're going to be talking about why Yasuke, the new Netflix show, is probably the biggest failure in anime I can remember. And I'm going to be talking about that as a historian, someone who was very excited for this anime, and someone who was very upset with how it went. So, obviously there's going to be some Yasuke spoilers. I'm going to talk about a lot of the elements in the show and what happens, who are the people involved, that sort of thing. And mostly this is going to be a pretty unscripted video. I have a couple points I want to cover, but I'm just going to get it out of me because I finally finished it yesterday. And fuck, man. But if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe so I can make more of it. I'm trying a bit of a different thing visually. Hopefully it works out. We'll see. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that as well. But for now, let's just get into the video talking about Yasuke. So, before I trash on this show, let's talk about a couple things that the show does really well. Firstly, the visuals are really nice. Great animation, really brutal in a lot of moments. There's a lot of blood, a lot of great sword moments, and just battle scenes in general in the show are great. There's a lot of mystical elements, which we'll get into later, but those also look pretty cool as well. So, visually, the show is great. It's pretty fun, too. Yeah, it's a little bit cliche at times, but if you're looking for something to just kind of turn your brain off and watch a lot of battles or whatever, it's a pretty fun show, you'll probably enjoy it. It also sheds light on a really interesting part of history, the first black samurai, something that many people just don't know about, so it could be a good way for them to kind of open the door into looking into that topic. Love that. Great thing. And if they're looking for that, there's a lot of really great flashbacks in the show which show parts of the actual Yasuke's life, albeit, there's some creative liberties involved, but pretty accurately represented based on the discrimination he would have felt, the favoritism by Oda Nobunaga, and just parts of his life in Japan. All of that is cool. And I've talked about the history of Yasuke in a video last week. You might know that at some point Yasuke just kind of disappeared. So the idea of following a plot after his disappearance, and then maybe using flashbacks to tell his story, while progressing his story beyond that, I'm pretty okay with it. That's kind of cool. But that is just about everything good I have to say about the show. So let's talk about the issues I've had with it and why I consider Yasuke to be a major failure. And the first bit of that comes from something that they talk about a lot on the show, especially starting from episodes 2 and carrying on through the rest of it actually. And that's the idea that the past informs our future. This is a point that the show hits on so many times. They really want to send that idea home, but they kind of skew the telling of the past that they're trying to teach about. And that's, I feel kind of spits on the idea of what they're trying to represent. They're trying to tell people the story of Yasuke, again, the first black samurai, a really cool part of black history that actually happened, which is why when they include things like magic, an astral world, mechs, shamans, werebears, and more, just why? All of these elements of supernatural events taking place in what could be a historically accurate series take away from the believability of it. This is a real thing that happened. A slave was brought to Japan on a missionary endeavor, and he earned the respect of Oda Nobunaga, one of the most important people in Japanese history, to the point where he became one of his samurais. That is phenomenal. That story is so cool on its own, you don't need to add other elements. And if you do, why make them supernatural to the point where people could think this entire story is fabricated? Which kind of leads me into the issue of why the name of the show is just Yasuke. They could have named this anything they wanted. They could have called it The Black Samurai. They could have called it whatever. But they chose Yasuke. They chose an actual historical figure, and instead of focusing on his story, they decided to add a bunch of fabricated supernatural elements which just take away from the whole thing, and again stop it from feeling like any part of this is real. If I was to tell you a story about how I went to the park and I saw aliens and there was a kaiju fight going on, you probably wouldn't believe the story, which in the same way, if you're telling the story of this black samurai in Japan in the 1500s, and then I'm like, yeah, then the mechs showed up, and the wizards and the shamans. Like, at what point does the Black Samurai seem like something that's also made up? A good example I kind of thought of while I was talking to my friends about this was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln is a real person. Probably wasn't a vampire hunter. But the title of the movie, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, informs you that this is going to have some supernatural, some strange element that stops it from being an actual biopic or actual historical piece. Instead, Yasuke. If I was, and when I did hear the title Yasuke, I thought we would have a historical representation of his life, of Yasuke. The story of Yasuke, you know? So diverting so strongly from the story of Yasuke was just weird. Now we have to go into the story a little bit. There's a few things I want to talk about in particular. The first act versus the final act, some of the characters involved, and the resolution of the story. So the Netflix version of Yasuke takes place sometime after the fall of Nobunaga, where he's basically living as a boatman in the city. There happens to be this girl in the town who's a chosen one and has supernatural powers and is some kind of... she's the Avatar, basically. She can manipulate the world around her however she wants. So he has to take her to this doctor guy who ends up being someone who worked for Nobunaga, and then together they fight against the daimyo of the region, who is this immortal witch. There's a lot there, but you're gonna have to roll with it. In the first 3 episodes, we're introduced to this villain who is a member of the Catholic Church. An idea I really liked, considering that Yasuke was brought to Japan as a slave for the Catholic Church being used in missionary work. So having him fight against the Catholic Church would be a really cool plotline. I like that a lot, actually. However, the priest ends up dying pretty early on, and we move on to the real villains. From here, you might assume, yeah, maybe we're going to talk about the guy who led to the death of Nobunaga, Mitsuhide. And yeah, he does come up. But he's an underling for some reason, and instead we have this daimyo who is this ancient immortal force who has magic, and she can give people magic, and yada yada. Why have this extra villain character when you already have Mitsuhide, who could have played a great endgame villain for this story? If the story followed the villains of the Catholic Church and Mitsuhide, these are both things which led to huge tragedies in Yasuke's life, so those would be great villains for this story. That being said, the real Yasuke didn't really deal with too many immortal witches. As the story progresses and we actually get towards the final battle scene, we have a ton of really cheesy and cliche moments that are kind of ripped from other mediums. For example, we have a giant mech making friends with a person and flying himself into the enemies, counting down towards his self-destruction, basically just using the scene from Iron Giant. We have a Avatar struggle between the girl and the daimyo, which goes down almost exactly like it does in Avatar, where she starts turning a different color and there's like this tug-of-war moment, followed by her hugging the main villain to death. Sure. And then she cries on the deceased Yasuke to bring him back to life. All of that is stuff I hate. It was cliche, it can be done well, but like, I don't know. The robot thing, fine. Everything involving the girl kind of takes the story out of what I want it to be, though. And I think the big problem I have with that is that when the girl is in the picture, the story isn't about Yasuke anymore. It's about this chosen one child, and that takes away from the whole point of the story. Yasuke could have been this amazing series telling people some black history from Japan, which many people didn't know about or just will never know about. But instead we're following this chosen one girl, and even though the title is Yasuke, she's the one who saves the day. She's the one who defeats the villain, revives him, and it feels kind of strange that you've had this dialogue between Yasuke and Mitsuhide throughout the series about how he's always going to be a servant, he's never going to be the leader, and then the resolution has him being saved by some girl who he's kind of serving and who's effectively leading the battle at that point. I don't know, there's a lot in Yasuke that just rubs me the wrong way, but I think the part that bothers me the most is that when we're having flashback scenes, there isn't a single one that involves elements of mechs, magic, robots, anything like that, and those are all the best parts of the show, where we get to look at the real Yasuke's life and these real human moments that are so cool, and the show could have just been about his story, but instead we have some chosen one girl who can use psychic powers in the Avatar state or whatever, and like, you had something good, why add to it with all these supernatural elements? I don't know, those are just my thoughts though. Let me know your thoughts on Yasuke if you watched it as well. Did you enjoy it? Do you wish they kind of stuck to the original story? Because God, I know I do. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more. You can also check out the links in the description for my Patreon if you want to support the channel a little bit extra. But for now, a big thank you goes out to our patrons, with our Daiokai Jacob Wiley and Iffy Babes, our yokai Amelia Hellman, NL Cruz, Janice Not Janice, and Lucifina Akuma, and our Hanyo Anthony Hogan, Brittany K, Eli Conem, Kiwi Dog, Love the Kiwi, Michael Greco, Mochi Num Num, Negakitty, Samantha Olsen, Savage Camel, Simon Electric again, Suki Neko, and Ziv. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.